Before we begin, here's something you need to know. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who teach you how to live without them. They smile to your face while slowly erasing you from their lives. And when you finally see the truth, it's too late to be the same person again. This is the story of how I stopped being invisible and started being free. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories like this. My name is Margaret Whitmore. I'm 74 years old, and until not long ago, I believed I had done everything right. I raised a daughter while working full-time at the county library. I buried my husband 12 years ago and never remarried. I dedicated myself fully to my family, especially after my daughter Susan's divorce left her with 2 kids and a house she couldn't afford. I stepped in quietly, without asking for recognition. I cooked, I babysat, I paid bills when I could. I did what mothers do, what grandmothers do, what women like me have done for generations without applause. Haley, my oldest granddaughter, used to sit on my lap and ask me to tell her fairy tales. She'd braid my thinning gray hair and say I looked like a queen. I thought we had something special. I really did. So when she announced her engagement, I was genuinely happy. I knew weddings were expensive, and although I live on a fixed income, I offered to pay for the photo and video package. I didn't want her worrying about the cost of preserving her memories. It felt like the least I could do, after all the years she'd brought light into my life. I signed the contract, paid with my credit card, and kept the receipts neatly folded in a drawer. She never even asked how much it cost. Nobody did. That should have been my first warning sign, but I ignored it. The rehearsal dinner was the first time I felt something shift. The venue was a renovated barn just outside town, all rustic wood and fairy lights. It was beautiful in a way Pinterest loves, artificially natural. People were laughing, sipping from mason jars, taking selfies under twinkling strings of bulbs. I stood off to the side, watching Haley move through the crowd like she belonged to another world. She saw me and smiled, a small, practiced smile. Then she walked over, her phone in one hand, and her other arm looped through her fiancé's. "Hey, Grandma," she said softly. "Can I talk to you for a sec? Over here?" I followed her a few steps away from the others, near a row of folding chairs. The videographer and his assistant were doing test shots, scanning the space. That's when she said it. "You understand, right? The style of the video is modern, sort of minimal. I just think it might be better if you're not in the final cut, or not too much. It's nothing personal. It's just the vibe, the vibe." That word hit me like ice water down my spine. I looked into her eyes, searching for some kind of joke, some hint of discomfort, even shame. But all I saw was discomfort with me, with the fact that I didn't fit in her carefully curated narrative. I smiled, the kind of smile women wear when their hearts are breaking, but they don't want to cause a scene. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I understand." She gave me a quick hug and walked away, already on to the next thing. I stood there for a long time, pretending to look at centerpieces, my hands trembling. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the receipts spread out in front of me. I read every line of the contract. I called the videographer's office and asked about their cancellation policy. They were polite, even sympathetic. The service hadn't been performed yet. Canceling now was well within the agreement. I wouldn't get everything back, but most of it. Enough. I hung up the phone and looked around my empty living room. The photos on the walls, the books I'd read to my grandchildren, the armchair where I used to rock Haley to sleep, all of it suddenly felt like set dressing. Not real. Not mine. The next morning, I sent the cancellation email. I didn't tell anyone. Not my daughter, not Haley, not even the neighbor who brings me homemade cookies every Christmas. I simply erased myself. If I was going to be invisible in their story, then so be it. Let there be no story at all. And still, I hoped, deep down, I was wrong about them. But I wasn't. And what happened next confirmed everything I never wanted to believe. After the rehearsal, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling most of the night, listening to the soft hum of my old refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. My heart wasn't just heavy, it was humiliated. I didn't know what hurt more, the way Haley dismissed me or how easily it seemed to roll off Susan's back. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe she hadn't meant it that way. Maybe it was just wedding stress, too much pressure from the Instagram generation. But the knot in my chest told another story. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to believe that I wasn't going crazy, so I called Susan. She picked up on the third ring, her voice chipper and distracted. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" I hesitated. "Can we talk for a moment? About yesterday?" A pause. "About what exactly?" "About what Haley said. At the rehearsal, she asked me to stay out of the wedding video because I ruined the vibe." Another pause, then a sigh. "Oh, Mom, don't make this a thing. It's just the aesthetic she's going for. You know how these kids are today." She didn't mean it as an insult. I sat silently, absorbing her words. "You didn't defend me," I finally said. Susan laughed softly, like I was being dramatic. "It's her wedding, Mom. Let's not turn it into your moment." And that was it. It wasn't just Haley. It wasn't a slip or a moment of stress. This was how they saw me. An accessory. Optional. And if I didn't fit the look, I was just cut. I thanked Susan and hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Then I stood in the kitchen, looking at my reflection in the toaster, wondering how I had gone from being the woman who raised her daughter alone while working double shifts to someone who didn't belong in her granddaughter's wedding video. And I'll admit something I'm not proud of. I cried, quietly, alone. Not just because I was hurt, but because I was ashamed of how much it hurt. Because I let them believe I would always be there, always quiet, always giving, and never expecting anything in return. I went about the day like nothing had happened, folded the laundry, paid the water bill, refilled my pill organizer. Life moves forward, even when your heart is stuck in place. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept seeing her face, Haley's face, so polite, so rehearsed, telling me I didn't fit the vibe, as if I were an old couch they didn't want in the living room anymore. That evening, I pulled out the contract again. I read every word, line by line, like I used to do with old library catalogs. It was all there, clear as daylight. I had every right to cancel, and I had no obligation to tell anyone why. I called the video company again. This time, I spoke with the owner, a man named Jared. He remembered me immediately and said he understood completely. Business is business. I canceled politely, firmly, and got the confirmation email minutes later. The refund would be processed within 5 to 7 days. When the call ended, I sat in silence. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I didn't want to hurt them. I just didn't want to be part of a story where I was only welcome when silent, smiling, and out of the frame. The morning of the wedding arrived with sunshine and soft wind. I put on a pale blue dress, the one Haley once told me made me look classy. I wore the pearl earrings my husband gave me on our last anniversary before he passed. I brushed my hair, applied some lipstick. I looked like myself, like the Margaret I'd always been. I arrived at the venue on time, hugged some of the guests, and took my seat in the back row. No one mentioned the cameras. No one noticed their absence, at least not at first. The ceremony was beautiful. Haley cried. Her new husband beamed. People clapped and threw flower petals. And I sat there, a quiet ghost in their perfect picture, knowing there would be no photos to prove I was ever there. But I was there, and I was watching everything. The day after the wedding, I woke up early. Habit, I suppose. For 74 years, life has trained me to rise before the sun. I stood at the window with my coffee, watching the light creep across the yard. The bird feeder needed refilling. The roses needed trimming. The world moved on, indifferent to what had happened. I sat at the table, thinking maybe, just maybe, no one had noticed. Maybe they assumed the videographers were somewhere else, out of sight, doing their work quietly. That hope didn't last long. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Haley. I answered, already knowing her voice wouldn't be kind. "Grandma," she snapped, not even trying to sound polite. "What did you do?" My chest tightened. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. Don't play dumb. Where were the cameras yesterday? Why isn't there a single professional photo from the ceremony?" There it was. "I canceled the contract," I said evenly. "I paid for it. I had the right." "You... what?" Her voice cracked. "You canceled the whole photo and video team? Why would you do that?" "You told me not to be in the video, Haley," I said. "You said I didn't match the vibe. I figured I shouldn't ruin it for anyone." There was silence on the other end, thick and burning. I could hear her breathing hard, the kind of breath that comes from someone used to control and suddenly realizing they've lost it. "You ruined everything," she whispered. "Everything. This was the most important day of my life." I closed my eyes. You told me I didn't belong in it. You're so selfish, she hissed, and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time after that. I knew the fallout was coming, but I didn't expect it to be so instant, so venomous. It wasn't just disappointment. It was hate from someone I loved more than words. By the afternoon, Susan called. Her tone was colder than winter. What the hell were you thinking? Mom? I was thinking I didn't want to spend thousands of dollars to be excluded. You did this to punish her. Admit it. I swallowed hard. I did it to respect her wishes. She didn't want me to be seen, so I made sure I wouldn't be. You're unbelievable, she said. All these years we've taken care of you. I cut her off. Taken care of me? Susan, I've paid your rent more times than I can count. I watched your kids so you could go back to work. I paid for braces, sports uniforms, plane tickets, and now this wedding package. I never asked for thanks, but don't pretend you carried me. I carried all of you. There was a stunned silence on her end. I need to go, she finally muttered, and hung up. By the end of the day, Haley had blocked me on Instagram. Susan hadn't returned my texts. Even my younger grandchildren stopped responding to my weekly Sunday messages. I became radioactive. Not a person, just a problem. I tried not to cry. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. But it did, because all those years I told myself I was loved, that we were a family. They were built on silence, on me saying yes, on me swallowing pain, on me pretending that being ignored was okay. It wasn't okay. It had never been. The days that followed were quiet, oppressively so. No calls, no visits. I didn't hear from anyone, not even neighbors who usually waved. Maybe word had spread. Maybe people were giving me space. What I had now wasn't space. It was erasure. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I asked myself what it would look like to live without them. Not just physically, but emotionally. To stop bending, to stop apologizing for existing. And with that, I began to make decisions. Not out of rage, out of clarity. Você diz, 1. O ChatGPT disse, Chapter 4. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It became honest. For once, I wasn't pretending everything was fine. I wasn't filling gaps with casseroles and birthday cards. I wasn't trying to earn love with bank transfers and baked goods. The phone didn't ring. No one came by. And strangely, the quiet felt cleaner than the noise ever had. But the world doesn't stay quiet for long, especially not after a wedding with no video. By the middle of the week, the ripple began. It started small. A message on Facebook from a distant cousin asking why Haley hadn't posted any pictures yet. Then came a comment under one of Susan's photos. Can't wait to see the wedding video. There was no video. That's when the calls resumed. Not to talk, but to attack. Susan's voice, sharp and short. You need to fix this, Mom. Call the company and rebook. I can't, I said. The wedding is over. Then call them and see if they can do something. A photo shoot, a recreation, anything. It's not my responsibility anymore, I said, and meant it. She hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, Haley showed up at my doorstep. I hadn't seen her since the wedding. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice cracked and tired. Why would you do this to me? She asked. Why would you take this away? I invited her in. She refused. You could have told me. You could have said something. I looked her in the eye, my voice even. Would you have listened? She hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't answer. I did everything I could for this family, I said, my voice steady. But I won't pay to be erased. You weren't erased, she snapped. You asked me not to appear. That's the same thing. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they weren't the kind I recognized. Not grief, not regret, frustration, embarrassment. I needed this to be perfect, she whispered, and I needed to stop pretending I didn't matter. Haley turned and walked away. She didn't look back. Later that night, I received an email. It was from the wedding photographer, someone Haley must have hired independently for a few shots. They wanted to confirm if I had canceled the original package. I replied simply, yes, I paid for it. I canceled it. That's all. A day later, a new post went up on Haley's profile. A blurry photo taken by a guest. The caption read, "Even when things don't go as planned, love wins." The comment section lit up with sympathy. Did your photographer mess up? Why isn't there a video? Still waiting for the real pics. She didn't reply to anyone, and neither did I. But I noticed something. No one had called to ask why I canceled. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a villain. So I gave them one. I returned to my quiet house, made myself tea, and opened a book I hadn't touched in years. It was a collection of essays by women over 70, raw, beautiful, unapologetic voices. I read one line over and over again until it stitched itself into me. You can love people who never deserved your silence. And with that, I made a list. Not of people, of payments. The rent I'd covered, the phone plans I paid, the monthly deposits into Haley's account, birthday money, holiday help, grocery gift cards, all of it. Not out of bitterness, but to see the weight I had been carrying, and to finally let it go. The next Sunday, I didn't send my usual morning texts. For years, every Sunday like clockwork, I messaged each of my grandchildren, Haley, Dylan, and Olivia. A quick hello, a memory, a picture of something I'd baked, or a quote I found in a book. It was my little way of staying in their lives. But not this Sunday. I stared at my phone, the empty text thread taunting me. I set it down, then turned it face down. Not one of them had messaged me first, not even once. By Tuesday, I was completely cut off. No calls, no visits. Haley had blocked me. Susan was cold and distant. Dylan and Olivia didn't answer. I was being slowly erased from my own family, like a stain they wanted to scrub out of the narrative. I went to the grocery store that afternoon and ran into an old neighbor, Janice. She smiled. Hey, Margaret, I saw the pictures from Haley's wedding. Looked beautiful, but no video? What happened? I froze. My smile was tight. They decided not to have one. Oh, she said, clearly sensing the tension. Well, these kids today, right? Everything's different now. Different. Yes. That night I sat in my living room, staring at the silence. There was a time when I believed silence was peace. But silence, when it's forced on you, becomes something else entirely. It becomes proof of how easily people can pretend you never mattered. I opened my banking app. I stared at the automatic transfers scheduled for the beginning of the month. $650 to Susan, temporary rent help. $85 to Haley, part of her cell phone bill. $200 to Dylan for his car insurance. I had been quietly supporting their lives for years. Not because they asked, because I loved them. Because that's what I was taught to do. Keep the family together, fill the gaps, smooth the wrinkles no one wants to see. But I wasn't smoothing anymore. I was disappearing. So I turned them off, one by one, canceled the payments, closed the shared family phone plan, ended the automatic gifts, not as punishment, as closure. I didn't send a message. I didn't explain. I just let it go. 3 days later, I received a message from Susan. Short, cold. Did you forget to send the rent this month? I waited, watched the screen. She didn't follow up with a question, didn't ask how I was, didn't say she missed me. Just that, did you forget? I replied, no. That was it. Her reply came within minutes. Seriously? You're going to act like this over a wedding? I didn't respond. She sent another one. You're punishing all of us. And for what? Not wanting to be in a stupid video? Still, I said nothing. And that's when it hit me. They didn't think I was hurt. They thought I was lashing out. They couldn't imagine that I had reached my limit, not out of anger, but because of clarity. Because I had seen the truth, that I was only visible when I was useful, when I gave, when I smiled and nodded and faded into the background so they could shine. But I wasn't fading anymore, and that terrified them. They had built their lives on the assumption that I would always be there, and now, for the first time, I wasn't. I didn't cry when I canceled the payments. I didn't even flinch. That surprised me. The Margaret I used to be would have agonized over it, would have worried about Susan's rent, about whether Haley's phone would get cut off, whether Dylan would make his car payment on time. But the woman sitting at her desk that morning wasn't that Margaret anymore. I didn't feel cruel. I felt awake. For years, I'd been pouring into them without measure. And what had I been filling? A hole that never closed, a thirst that never eased. They never thanked me. Not once. Not truly. And I don't mean the polite thanks, Grandma. I mean the kind of gratitude that makes you feel seen, that says, I know what you've done for me. I know who you are. I never got that. I just got needs. It wasn't long before Susan demanded a lunch. Not invited. Demanded. The text was brief. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 12 p.m., Mason's Diner. Not, are you free? Not, Would you like to talk? Just a directive. I stared at the message, then typed back, okay. I chose to go, not for her, but for myself. The next day I arrived 5 minutes early. As always, Susan showed up 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, no smile. She sat down without saying hello. So this is how you want it now? I looked at her calmly. How I want what? This distance, the cold shoulder, cutting us off. I didn't cut anyone off, I said. I just stopped carrying everyone's weight. She huffed. Mom, this is ridiculous. All this because Haley didn't want you in a video? I leaned in slightly. This isn't about a video. It's about a lifetime of being background support, a wallet, a babysitter, a backup plan. Susan rolled her eyes. That broke me a little. You know what hurts more than anything? I asked quietly. It's not what Haley said. It's that you didn't even blink when she said it. You didn't defend me. You didn't ask her to rethink it. You just let it happen. She was stressed. It was her big day, and I was invisible. Again, she crossed her arms. Maybe you need some space. Maybe it's better if you take some time, away from the family. Until you're ready to move past this. I felt something inside me settle. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. She frowned. Saying what? For making it clear. I stood up, reached into my purse, pulled out a 20, and laid it on the table. For your lunch, I said. Then I walked out, my legs steady, my back straight. She didn't call after me. I didn't look back. That night, I cleaned out a closet I hadn't touched in years. I found an old painting set my husband had bought me once on a whim after I told him I loved the smell of oil paint. I had never opened it. I ran my fingers over the brushes, still wrapped in plastic, still new, and I thought, what else have I put on hold? What parts of myself have I boxed away in favor of being someone else's anchor? So I made a promise to myself that night. I would find out, not to prove anything, not to get anyone back, but because, after 74 years, I was ready to be more than just a role in other people's stories. I didn't expect to feel so light after that lunch. It wasn't happiness. God, no. It wasn't relief, either. It was something stranger, like I had been holding my breath for years and didn't even realize it until I finally exhaled. For the first time, I stopped asking myself what I'd done wrong. I started asking what they had done, or more precisely, what they had never done. Respect me. That same week, I walked to the local library. It's not far, just 10 blocks down the road. I hadn't been inside in years. Funny, considering I spent most of my life in places like it. Cataloging, shelving, recommending titles. It was like muscle memory. The smell of paper, the low hum of the air conditioning, the shuffling of pages, it all came rushing back. I signed up for a community book club on Wednesdays and a watercolor class on Saturdays. The woman who ran the painting group, Lisa, was maybe in her mid-60s and had this kind, bohemian energy. She didn't ask what brought me there. She just smiled and handed me a set of brushes. I've seen you around, she said. Glad you came. And just like that, I belonged somewhere. Not because I was related to anyone or needed or useful. Just because I showed up. Susan didn't call after the lunch. Not once. Neither did Haley. And while part of me still hoped for a message, the other part, the part that was growing stronger every day, was glad they didn't. It gave me space to breathe, to think, to be. But life has a funny way of showing its truths at the most unexpected times. One morning, I stopped by the bank to close an old savings account I no longer used. While the teller processed the paperwork, she glanced up and said, Whitmore, any relation to Haley Whitmore? Her wedding was just a couple weeks ago, right? I smiled politely. Yes, she's my granddaughter. Oh, the teller said, lowering her voice. My niece was one of the wait staff at that event. Said it was beautiful, but kind of tense. Apparently, there was a lot of talk about a missing videographer. I nodded. That's true. She looked surprised but didn't ask more. Professionalism, I suppose. But it was there, in her eyes. That flicker of curiosity, of judgment, or maybe just confusion. It didn't bother me. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Later that day, I walked into Mason's grocery and saw a familiar face by the cereal aisle. Mrs. Peters, Susan's old high school teacher. She gave me that awkward half-smile people wear when they're not sure where you stand. I heard you've been keeping to yourself lately, she said, not unkindly. I smiled back. No, I've just been keeping for myself. And I meant it. But the family noticed my silence too. It started small, Susan's husband, her second one, called, asking about a tax document I had once helped him find. I told him to check with a CPA. Then Dylan texted to say his car insurance didn't go through. I didn't respond. And when Olivia emailed to ask if I could help her cover books for her fall semester, I sent back one sentence: "Ask your mother." That's when I got the message from Susan. "So this is what we're doing now? You're cutting off your entire family over your feelings?" Feelings. As if that word meant something petty, like I'd spilled milk and was being dramatic. I didn't reply, because by now I understood something critical. People will always call your boundaries a betrayal when they benefited from your lack of them. I didn't need to justify my silence. I didn't owe them my forgiveness. They had built a world where I didn't exist, except when they needed something. So now, I was doing the same. I was building a world without them, and it was already starting to feel like home. It's strange how quickly a routine can shift. 1 month ago, I would have spent my mornings transferring money, checking in on Susan's bills, texting Haley reminders, double-checking Dylan's college account. I called it help. But now, looking back, I realize it wasn't help. It was survival. It was how I bought my place in a family that never offered one freely. Now, my mornings look different. They started with warm tea instead of stress, with a paintbrush in hand instead of a debit card, with silence. Not the cold silence they had forced on me, but a gentle, welcome kind. The kind where you can hear yourself again. I had been going to the library 3 times a week. On Wednesdays we read. On Saturdays we painted. On the other days, I wandered through the shelves, through memories, through possibilities. One day, Lisa from the painting class approached me after the session. "You ever think about doing a gallery night?" she asked. "The local arts center lets seniors reserve space once a season. Your work has soul." I blinked at her. Stunned. "You think people would want to see it?" She smiled. "I think people need to see it." That night, I stood in front of the canvas I'd been working on for 3 weeks. It was simple, just a dining table under dim light. But at the end of the table, one chair was empty. I hadn't planned it. My hand just did it. It was the first time I saw my story reflected back at me. The next day, I filled out the gallery submission form. That same afternoon, I passed a coffee shop downtown and noticed Haley sitting by the window with 2 friends. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. I watched them laugh and scroll through their phones. One of them held up a camera. Haley posed, smiled, tossed her hair just right. I didn't feel jealous. I felt detached, because I saw it for what it was now. Performance, perfect angles, perfect light, perfect illusion. She didn't want a family that was real. She wanted a family that looked good in pictures. And now, she had neither. Back home, I opened my old notebook. It was filled with lists and notes I used to jot down. Groceries, reminders, gift ideas for the kids. On the last page, I started a new list. I titled it, "Things I Want That No One Can Give Me Peace When I Wake Up." A name spoken with love, not obligation. Silence that feels like comfort, not punishment. The freedom to be who I am, not who they want. The right to be forgotten and not care. I sat back and looked at that list. Not one thing on it had a dollar sign. Not one could be bought or owed. It was mine, all mine. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. I never meant to hear about Haley's reenactment. But this town isn't very big. 2 women in my painting class were chatting near the window, brushes in hand, canvases forgotten. "I heard she hired a whole new team," one of them said. "Some kind of stylized wedding shoot, like a redo, but for Instagram." "Wasn't the wedding just a month ago?" the other asked. "Yeah, but apparently her grandma ruined it or something. No video, no professional photos. She's devastated." I didn't say a word. I dipped my brush in blue, then gray, then a soft gold, and dragged the color across the canvas. But inside, I was still. Not proud, not angry, just still. That night, curiosity got the best of me. I typed Haley's name into Instagram. Her account was public again. There it was, a carousel of perfectly posed images. She was in her dress again, standing in a field of tall grass, backlit by sunset. Her husband was beside her, dressed in a new suit. The caption read, "Sometimes life gives you a second chance to tell your story right." Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, all filled with admiration. So dreamy, literal fairy tale vibes. "Where did you get this lighting?" I studied every frame. And in everyone, I noticed the same thing. Something missing. Joy. There were smiles, sure, but the kind that live on camera and vanish in real life. There was no grandmother holding her hand, no mother brushing tears away, no candid moments, just staging, just angles, just performance. I closed the app. She hadn't just tried to replace the lost footage, she tried to erase what couldn't be controlled. And maybe she succeeded, but I wasn't the one who lost something permanent. She was. She could redo the pictures, recreate the poses, reconstruct the setting, but she couldn't fake the emotion that came from belonging, from connection, from the history that made a moment meaningful. And I realized something right then. Haley hadn't blocked me from her video because I ruined the vibe. She blocked me because I didn't fit her illusion. I was too real, too old, too much of a reminder that life isn't filtered and family isn't curated. And she didn't want that truth documented. She wanted a fantasy, so she built one. Let her have it, because I finally had something better. Not everyone would understand what I did. Not everyone needed to. But deep down, I knew. I hadn't ruined her wedding. I had saved myself. It started small. An email from Susan's landlord to her old AOL account, one I helped her set up when she was 32. It had bounced back, then been forwarded to me by mistake. The message read, "Final notice, rent overdue, payment not received for the second month in a row." A ripple in the surface. Then came the voicemail from Dylan. I hadn't heard his voice in months. He didn't say, "Hi, Grandma." He didn't ask how I was. He just said, "Hey, I think there was a mistake with the car insurance. The payment bounced, and they're saying the policy is suspended. Can you look into it?" I didn't respond. Then Susan herself broke the silence, this time with an email, cold and clipped. Subject, disappointing body. I hope you're satisfied. Everything's a mess now, and you've made your point. That was it. No apology, no reflection, no acknowledgement, just blame. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in my backyard that evening, watching the sky burn orange as the sun dropped behind the treetops. I listened to the rustle of the wind and the rhythm of crickets warming up for the night. I used to spend evenings like that doing online bill payments for Susan, organizing gift cards for the grandkids, researching scholarships, always fixing, filling, fussing over every part of their lives but my own. Now, I was just there, present, whole, and they were crumbling. I had never intended for that to happen. But there it was, the quiet collapse of a structure that had relied entirely on me staying silent and generous and small. The next morning, I went into town for a few groceries. As I walked past the cafe, I saw Susan inside. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, her eyes tired, her phone in her hand. She looked up, saw me through the window. We locked eyes. She didn't wave. Neither did I. And that moment was more honest than any conversation we'd had in years. She had never been angry because I hurt her. She was angry because I stopped enabling her. A week later, Olivia sent me a text. It was different from the others. "Grandma, I miss you. I don't know what's going on, but I hope you're okay. I'd like to visit sometime if that's okay." It was the first real message I'd received in months. I didn't reply right away, not out of pettiness, out of caution, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to be a doormat for someone's guilt. I needed to know that if Olivia came to see me, she wasn't doing it for her mother, or to play peacemaker, or to soften me up. She had to come because she saw me, not because I owed her anything, not because I was a soft place to land when things got hard. So I waited. And that silence? It didn't hurt anymore. It healed. I knew the invitation would come eventually. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a pale pink envelope, like it had been chosen by a wedding planner. Inside was a card, thick and perfumed, with embossed lettering. "Family lunch, Saturday at 1 p.m. Let's reconnect. We miss you." No names, no apology, no explanation, just branding. I stared at the card for a long time. My first instinct was to cry, not because I was touched, but because they still didn't understand. This wasn't a lunch. It was a strategy, a performance for optics, a staged reunion, something to post about, to tell others that we worked it out like families always do. I could already see the caption in Susan's voice, "Grateful for forgiveness and second chances, family over everything." But they didn't want to rebuild trust. They wanted to rebuild image. I laid the invitation on the table and walked to the kitchen, put the kettle on, watched the steam rise. For days, I thought about it. Should I go? Should I finally speak my piece? Should I look them in the eyes and ask the questions they were too cowardly to ask themselves? But then I remembered the calm I had built, the quiet mornings, the fresh canvas, the taste of tea without bitterness, the way I had started to feel like me again. And I realized that peace wasn't something I was willing to gamble. Not for them. Not for a table I was no longer welcome at unless I brought everything they needed. So on Friday night, I called the number listed on the card. Susan picked up. I could hear chatter in the background. Probably Olivia and Dylan. Maybe Haley too. "Hello?" she said, cautious. "It's me," I said. "Oh," she paused. "I wasn't sure if you'd call. I got your invitation." Another pause. "And? I won't be attending." She inhaled sharply. "Mom, can we just—" "No," I said firmly. "We can't just. That's the problem. You're not ready to listen. You want to repair the story, not the relationship. You want me to be quiet again, useful again, forgiving again. Isn't that what family does?" "Not without honesty," I replied. "Not without accountability." There was silence on the line, so I added, "You don't miss me. You miss the version of me who tolerated everything. That version doesn't live here anymore." I hung up before she could speak. The next morning, I walked to the library. It was gallery day, my first art showing. The community room had been transformed into a small exhibition. My paintings lined the walls, landscapes, quiet moments, scenes from memory. And in the center, on a pedestal under soft light, was the piece I'd kept for last, a ballroom, empty tables, ghosted outlines of guests, and at the end of the frame, a single chair, illuminated, not occupied, not forgotten, seen. People came, strangers mostly, a few friends from class. One woman cried when she saw the ballroom piece. "It's like being uninvited without ever being told," she whispered. "I know that feeling." I nodded. So did I. Near the end of the evening, a little girl walked in with her parents. She stopped in front of the ballroom painting and tilted her head. She looked up at me and asked, "Is that your chair?" I smiled, warmth rising in my chest. "It was," I said softly. "But now I have a whole room." And in that moment, I understood the kind of ending I had written for myself, not loud, not dramatic, not vengeful, but full, complete, mine. It had been weeks since I'd declined their invitation, weeks of quiet, of paintings and books, of tea that didn't need to be rushed. For the first time in my life, I felt grounded, not just in my body, but in my choices, in who I had become, not in who I had been expected to be. I didn't care about the phone calls anymore. I didn't check my inbox obsessively for apologies that would never come. I didn't search through social media to see if Haley had posted some new staged, happy family moment. I didn't need to. What I needed was my own reflection, and I saw it in the piece I had created. The next time I saw Susan, it was on my terms. It happened unexpectedly. I had just finished my usual Saturday painting class and was walking back home when I saw her, standing by the coffee shop's door, hands shoved into her jacket pockets, staring at the ground. Her face was drawn, tired, like the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. I stopped at the curb, watching her from a distance. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about her, or the others. It wasn't that I didn't feel something. But I had learned to live without that something ruling me, without their expectations weighing me down. She looked up. Her eyes met mine across the street. For a moment, we just stood there. Neither of us moved. Neither of us called out. Then, slowly, she crossed the street. When she was a few feet away, she stopped, not too close, but not far either. "You're really doing this," she said, her voice soft, a little broken. "Doing what?" I asked. "Living without us." It was a statement, not a question. I felt a pang, but I held it in, like I had learned to hold everything else. "I'm living for myself," I said. "I've been doing that for a while now." I didn't know what it felt like until I stopped being useful to everyone else. She looked at me, eyes filled with something like regret. "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I raised a hand, cutting her off gently. "You didn't hurt me, Susan. You made me see the truth. That was the gift." She blinked, her lips trembling. "I don't know how to fix this, how to fix us." "You don't," I said. "You can't fix something that wasn't broken to begin with. You just need to start being honest with yourself, and with me." I don't know if I can," she admitted. "I don't know what I was supposed to do. I thought I was protecting Haley, making sure she had everything she wanted, and in doing that, I I pushed you away. I stepped closer, closing the gap between us. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out, to hold her, to make it all right again. But there was also a part of me that knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not unless she was ready to see me as I was, fully, completely, without making me fit into the boxes they'd designed for me. Maybe that's where you've been going wrong all along, I said softly. You don't have to protect everyone. Sometimes, you need to protect what's yours. She nodded, her eyes glistening with the weight of things left unsaid. But there was no anger in it anymore, just sadness, and maybe, finally, a little understanding. I'm not going to fix this for you, I said, taking a step back. I'm going to let you figure it out, just like I did. Susan looked down, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her face soften. I'll try, she said. I nodded. That's all you can do. And then I turned to walk away, not with bitterness, but with something closer to peace. I didn't look back, because this time, I was no longer waiting for them to notice me. I had already noticed myself, and for the first time in decades, that was enough. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.